It's social distancing at the chamber. Happy hour with Hammer. My name is Garrick Taylor, here with the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. Hey, Glenn.
Good to see you, Garrick.
Well, special night when we can welcome a guest, longtime friend, longtime education advocate, but also a friend of the business community. I'll let you do a proper introduction here.
Well, I call Jaime Molera the youngest statesman in Arizona. You take a look at the good things that have happened in the state over the last 20 or so years, whether it's in education or the state's business environment, and Jaime has been at the center of the positive activity. He's the former state superintendent of public instruction. On 2 occasions, he was the chair of the state's Board of Education. And just very, very well respected across the state with Republicans, Democrats, party not determined. And I'll also say has been a great leader in the state in improving our relationship and taking our relationship with our friend, neighbor, and ally to the south, Mexico, to a new level. And we're lucky also to have Jaime Molera on the Chamber's board. Jaime, welcome to the show.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure to be on with you and Garrick. I just think the work that you all have been doing on behalf of our business community and quality of life has been outstanding. So I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Jaime, don't forget you're a multi-time winner of the annual Hammer Award.
I am. I've made sure that in my obituary, if anything happens to me, that's going to be very prominently displayed.
And I don't want any spoiler alerts, but I'm hearing that you're a very strong contender once again. So you may set the record.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I hope it's the actions, but I know those pictures in Mexico help too.
Well, one thing I wanted to say is you can't put on TV today without seeing Jaime Molera. And in addition to all these other great things, appreciate your role, your leadership role as the chair of the campaign to defeat Proposition 208. So that's today, as we're speaking. If you have a TV on, if you're not watching this broadcasted program, which again blows away Wayne's World and many other cable programs, Jaime Molera is on TV. Could you explain why the interest in taking the leadership role as chair to defeat Proposition 208?
Well, as you know, candidly, it was something that I'm not sure I was interested in doing again. I was hoping, like the rest of most rational folks, that this was not going to be put on the ballot, that because of the pandemic that we're facing, rational heads would have prevailed and said, look, doing this type of a business killing tax increase in Arizona was not a smart thing to do. So let's keep our powder dry and think about this next time around. But of course, as been the case, and unfortunately, the organizations that are the proponents of this initiative, I'm not sure they care about making sure Arizonans have good jobs and that we have a strong system. This is about union growth and I believe other means other than education funding. So I just came to the point where this was not good for our state. I mean, I'm a native Arizonan, as you know, born and raised in Nogales. And I know even folks that come here from other places love this state as much as I do, but I just felt this was antithetical to what we believe in Arizona. And also it's hurtful to our economy, and it really does not help educational attainment. So when you put all those things together, I just felt, and I was appreciative of the folks like yourself and other business organizations that asked me if I would step up and lend my voice. And that's all I'm doing, is I'm lending my voice. I think there's so many other people that have taken a leadership role, other business organizations, other thought leaders that are too many to mention here, but I'm just very honored to be associated with these types of individuals and organizations.
Well, first of all, I have to say, just the fact you're from Nogales, that should end this, because the best people in the world are from Nogales. So that's all I need to hear.
Cultural hub of the universe.
Love going there. but one thing I was remiss in not mentioning, we're looking at the architect, one of the key figures in developing Proposition 301, which is probably the most successful comprehensive education policy in the history of Arizona. So successful, so popular that after it was about to expire, the legislature a few years ago, in a bipartisan fashion, almost every member, if not every member of the legislature, voted to extend it for 20 years. Can you talk a little bit about Prop 301 and also how this proposition, just the process behind 208, funded by people in Portland, Oregon, was different from the very successful Proposition 301?
Yeah, I think about that process. I can't believe it's been 20 years ago when we referred it. And by the way, I'm a much bigger fan of referrals than initiatives, because the fact that you have to go through multiple committees, the fact that you have to shine the light on the language of the legislation, the fact that it's debated multiple times in both houses, I think is a much better process. And I think that lends itself to much higher quality public policies that end up getting formed. But having said that, when we did Prop 301, people forget a lot of it was because of the equity issues. We had just finished solving Roosevelt v. Bishop, which was a court case saying that our system of funding school construction, our capital construction, was unconstitutional. You had districts like Madison, you had districts that had a lot of wealth, maybe Scottsdale, versus the Nogaleses and Gadsden's that had very little property wealth. And so a kid that lived in a high wealth area, they stood to gain a lot more, whether it was technology, whether it was facilities, making sure that they had AC in the summer. I mean, it was fairly significant disparities between these areas. We solved it by creating what was called Students First, a program that was going to fund new construction. But the problem that we had was existing deficiencies. And we found out we had at least $1 billion. So we decided that we were going to do some kind of a way to get that $1 billion. And we thought the best way to do it was creating a revenue stream, in this case, part of the sales tax. Long story short, Jane Hull, then Superintendent Lisa Keegan, we discussed about what we needed to do. And we thought, well, there's an opportunity to not only address that issue, but how do we get funding to the classroom? How do we get funding to teachers? And so rather than just talk amongst ourselves, which unfortunately I think this initiative did, we brought in business organizations. We brought in chambers, Greater Phoenix Leadership. We brought in small business organizations. We brought in the Arizona Tax Research Association and said, if we're going to do this, how do we do it in a way that it is not job killing? How do we do this in a way that lends itself to academic achievement? And so what we structured was, remember, this was before Arizona had in place state standards and a statewide assessment. But we did say that not one dime would go to administration. First and foremost, I think that was important, saying every single dime is going to go to the classroom, which I thought was very powerful. The second piece was we made sure that the business groups were there at the table with the education organizations, including the Arizona Education Association. And at the time, their leader, Penny Cotterman, got all kinds of blowback because one of the components of this was merit pay for teachers. Can you imagine that being a controversial thing, that you have an outstanding teacher and you want to pay him or her more because they do above and beyond the call of duty? But there was a lot of blowback from her national organization saying, we don't believe in merit pay. It had to be across the board. It had to be this, like what this initiative does. Just basically, you're a great teacher, you get money, but you're a horrible teacher, you also get money. So as we put this together, that became the structure. And that's why I believe it won in the ballot. But ultimately, that process proved to be successful, right? We've seen not just our K-12 system be able to use this in a way that gives teachers on an ongoing basis with a very stable revenue source, not this source, which we all know income tax fluctuates wildly to the point where you get almost nothing. So you'll have years where, yeah, you might have a little bit of a bonus from this, but other years you'll get nothing. So how does that cause stability in the system? So that's flawed for that reason. The other thing I'll just say is that we felt strongly that it also had to be comprehensive, including higher education. And we look at what 301 did with our common college system, with funding for workforce development, and with our university system for funding for higher education research activities. That's led to massive growth in our biosciences. That's led to massive growth in what our universities have been able to do and compete with. Arizona State University yesterday was announcing that they're, for the 6th year in a row, that they're the most innovative university in the country. Well, that didn't happen by happenstance. That happened because they have strong leadership, they have strong ideas, but they also have the foundation and the resources to develop that innovation. And 301 was a big part of that. So all those things together, Glenn and Garrick, lend itself to why, when you do these types of major education policy, financial structures and accountability structures, it has to be done comprehensively. It can't be done by two organizations that have a very specific agenda, that are not from the state of Arizona, and that don't ask any Arizonans their input.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
well said.
one of the things that was the hallmark of that proposition, and maybe even proposition 1, 2, 3, is you had this three-legged stool. You talked about the fact that the public sector, the governor, the superintendent, leaders like yourself, legislators. Then you had the business community, and you had education stakeholders. We don't have that three-legged stool with Proposition 208, do we?
No, not even close. I don't even know if it's really a leg that they're standing. But you're right. Prop 1, 2, 3. I was talking to a reporter today that was saying, well, that's not enough. Well, it's $300 million a year, and if you think about it, it was built off of taking revenue, excess revenue from the state trust lands that we get in interest. But the trust, since the inception of Prop 1, 2, 3, has actually grown, right? The trust continues to grow. So we're continuing to build money. At the same time, we've been able to take a portion of that for our K-12 system. But again, Governor Ducey consulted with business organizations, consulted with education groups, did that process in a way that was, it made sense. And then basically he aimed, just like Governor Holt did with 301, we aimed and then fired. We just didn't fire all these shots and then hope that we were going to hit something that was meaningful.
Yeah. Jaime, I'm curious, you're in your career, you've been an advocate at the K-12 level, but you also mentioned your support and belief in the power of the higher education system in Arizona, community colleges and universities. Something that's been discussed as it comes to Prop 208 is that it puts such handcuffs on the budgeting process. Legislators are going to have to cut from somewhere during a time of economic downturn. They're probably going to have to turn to universities. And do you think that's just being alarmist, or do you think that's a real possibility?
You talk to any expert that deals with budget issues or economic analysis, and they're coming to the same conclusion. And the reason is simple. Arizona, our tax rate is built on the three-legged stool, right? We have property taxes that primarily support K-12. That's about half of the K-12 system. You got income taxes and corporate income taxes. And then, of course, the sales tax, TPT, transaction privilege tax. Well, the income tax is the most volatile. Now, Arizona does well because we've put in place a very competitive tax structure. And because we've said that small businesses are not captured under the corporate tax rates, right? They're allowed to file their taxes as individual. It's called pass-through taxes. So most small business owners, LLCs, as they make their income, they basically pay their taxes through the state income tax. Well, our tax is so competitive that we've been able to, just recently was announced, we're one of the top 5 or 6 of the growth states in the country, where our GDP has almost doubled what the average GDP for states across the country. Well, that's because we have a very competitive tax structure. We've done a very good job of investing in things that need to happen, like the Arizona Commerce Authority, like our university system and the research efforts there. These angel tax credits that incentivize investments. So we've been able to capture quite a bit of revenue. You put one of the highest tax structures in the country, where Arizona becomes we cracked the top 10, and not in a good way, then that would have a massive impact, both in the revenue flow that we get and just the capital investment. Because you're going to have folks going to other states in our region that don't have that tax structure. Prior to the pandemic, we were seeing California organizations come in here in droves because their tax structure is just out of control. And with the federal tax changes that don't allow for deductions, you can't deduct your state taxes from your federal taxes anymore. That's having an impact, and we're starting to see that. And states like Arizona are starting to benefit from that because it's coming home to roost in a state like California. So that's why, in a nutshell, and I know I've been going on, but that's why you need to have a competitive tax structure that lends itself to creating that revenue that will help all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's just for all these reasons you're saying. I mean, to put a jolt to the system, to say, hey, we're going to increase our tax rate. That's going to hit something like, I believe 50% of the filers who are going to be hit by this are small businesses. And then you've got over 50% of Arizona workers who work in the private sector work for one of these companies at a time that we have a pandemic and we're competing with other states for jobs, and our businesses that are here that are entrepreneurial and homegrown and successful are doing everything possible to stay afloat, to keep people on the payroll, to bring people back who have been furloughed. I can't think of at any time, I'll just say at any time, this would be terribly misguided. At this time, it almost seems to be cruel, because here you have companies that are doing everything they possibly can. Some of these people have put their life savings, their entire work as human beings into building these businesses. And here comes this Portland, Oregon outfit saying, you know something, we've got a great idea. We're gonna jack up your taxes. And look, we represent a lot of large companies, but the unfairness of saying we're gonna tax small entrepreneurial businesses at 8%, but to say to the Apples of the world, you'll stay at 4.9%. Again, I'm not advocating an increase in taxation. I mean, I'm doing this on an iPad, and I'm addicted to every Apple product out there, but it's unfair. And I just don't, I mean, this is just goes to show how important it is to have local stakeholders, both parties, educators, political leaders, business leaders, civic leaders engaged in this process, so you don't get a monstrosity like Proposition 208 popping up on the ballot.
And it gets even worse too, Glenn. I mean, the National Federation of Independent Businesses and the Arizona Small Business Association came out about a week ago, and they pointed out that not only was this, for all the reasons we've articulated, how bad it is, but it also gets worse. Because unlike our federal tax codes and unlike Arizona's state tax code, we peg our marginal tax rates to inflation. So it's benchmarked against whatever that year is. And as inflation, of course, inflation's a real thing, as any economist will tell you. As you're growing, just keeping up with inflation, since this initiative does not peg this number to inflation, every year, more Arizona businesses will fall into this, what I call this cancer of a tax increase. So there's so many things that are bad with this issue. Again, I know that a lot of folks want to support more money to schools. I've been on record. I do too. I think we need to make very targeted investments. I think we need to be very aggressive, but it has to be coupled with accountability. And it cannot destroy the economy that has allowed Arizona to become such a growth engine and an opportunity state for so many people.
Well, and you think about Arizona's pro-business reputation. This has been at least a quarter century in the making, and it's included Republican governors. It certainly included the tenure of Governor Napolitano, who made our income tax, signed a very important bill to make our income tax more competitive. She understood that that's an important tax in terms of when companies are looking to relocate. And in one fell swoop, we would destroy the state's reputation as a refuge of sorts from states like California that overtax and overregulate their businesses, particularly their small businesses.
Correct. Well, but like I said, I'm heartened that we have so many large and small business community organizations that are part of our growing coalition, but also a lot of individuals. Teachers are now starting to come out and say, you know what, this doesn't make sense, just from an academic standpoint, especially my point about accountability and how they're going to invest these dollars, and the types of folks that may not deserve these increases. And then we might look at, why are we putting in all these resources in the areas of decline, both academically and the parents just don't want to be in these schools, but yet we're still propping them up. So there needs to be a really thoughtful approach, but this certainly isn't it.
It's sold as $1 billion tax increase with zero accountability.
Well, which blows my mind in that not one major media outlet has ever questioned this notion that it has the most accountability of any initiative ever proposed in the history of mankind, or something to that effect. And I would say, okay, well then show me where these investments are going to guarantee that a kid is going to be reading by grade level at the 3rd grade, or they're going to be not needing remedial education when they go on to higher education. Right now, about half of our kids need some kind of remedial education when they go on to our colleges or universities. To me, by not having any sort of academic benchmarks that we were trying to hit, I just think is just unconscionable. And it's just a massive waste of taxpayer dollars.
Well, Jaime, I know that you're going to continue to fight for more resources and more results and more accountability. And, again, your record over the course of your career is unparalleled. And as a dad with 3 daughters who've been going through the public school system, I'm just deeply appreciative with that hat on for your efforts. You're a great leader for the state of Arizona.
Thank you, Glenn. But I would say to both you and Garrick, what you've all done at the chamber, whether it was coming through with thoughtful policies around our Medicaid system, and as you know, that was a massive battle that we did, saying, hey, we need to reform and expand our Medicaid, which we knew was the right thing to do. We fought against these laws that we thought were anti-immigration and that were really anti-Mexican American. The chamber was at the tip of the spear. I like the fact that the chamber has been nonpartisan in that, we've angered sometimes Democrats, we've angered sometimes Republicans, but ultimately the chamber is trying to do the right thing for Arizona. And I'm proud to be a part of that. I'm proud to be a board member of this organization. And I think if you fight for those things that you generally know to be important and good for the state, I think most of the time we're going to be successful. And I have a high degree of confidence we'll be successful again with this initiative. And if everybody votes no on 208, I think we're on our way to creating a much better Arizona.
Well said. And I could share with viewers on another episode some of the emails I've received with all capital letters, usually not friendly. But we try to do the right thing. And I appreciate, Jaime, you've been in so many of these successful and honorable fights with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaime. That's another edition in the books. We'll catch you on the next episode.